Good morning. My name is Jim Amihi, and I'm going to show you how to create new Hotfolder setups, or what they call Hotfolder queues, in GMG's PrintFactory RIP. So if you take a look here, you'll see if I select one of the printers here, I have multiple options for setting up a new queue. I can either come down here and click plus, and it just opens up a new queue. That's usually the easiest way. I can hit this down arrow here and select new queue. I could say file, queue, new queue, like that. And then you'll notice that there are some other queue settings that we'll get to in a little bit. So if I'd like, what I can do is go ahead and hit the plus button. And then you can see in our window here, we have 4 different options here. So standardized printing, meaning are you printing to a standard color space, like for instance proofing to Grackle or proofing to Swap, something like that. Mostly you're going to see this used in proofing workflows. And then you have photo printing, which obviously is for your typical photographic fine art printing workflows. You have 1-bit proofing, which is generally used for screenings for dot proofs, so a half-tone dot proof workflow. And then you'll see screen printing, which is for printing basically separates for screen printing, silk screening workflows. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and just choose photo printing. And then we'll go to the next tab here, and you'll see we can create a queue name. So let's just say we chose Epson Premium Glossy 250. So this is basically would be a queue or a hot folder for anything going to a glossy paper workflow. Okay, and the other thing that we can do is we can register the queue as a printer. So, and you can see if you scroll over, they in PrintFactory generally will give you some information about what that is. So in this case, it says select this option if you want to share the queue across the network. So basically that folder, basically this here, can be basically put into a network drive if you like. So you can see, like, if I wanted to create a map network drive on a server, for instance, that could be located on each individual's computer, that network map drive. So each person that needs to send jobs to the RIP can drop the folders right onto their computer's mapped network drive. So let's see here. So if I go in, you can see I chose PrintFactory hot folders as the folder to put all my hot folders in. So I'll just go ahead and select that. I'm just putting it on the desktop for now, just to make this easier. And then basically you can, if you want to extract the files and put them into a different location, you can do that by choosing a destination folder. So if you wanted to back up those files after they're printed, you can do that. You can also select to hold all your jobs coming into that hot folder for editing. So essentially you'll see a held job in the job queue here in the PrintFactory RIP, and the operator would have to manually release the job. Okay. On the next tab here, this is for putting in your own XML data, JavaScript data, that sort of thing for a queue specifically. So this is a programming field to adapt your hot folder properties for something specific that you need. Obviously, you need a programmer to do that. On this page here, this is basically just to report any errors that are going on. If something errors out, you could select to either print it anyway. Not sure why you'd want to do that. If there was an error, no need in wasting a job. I would say, if anything, you're going to select it to hold the job if there is some sort of an error happening. And then you'll see on the next tab here, so if you were to have a cutter already installed, and you would see the cutters on the left hand side here, you could select that cutter and then create different specific cutting rules for that specific cutter with this specific paper, essentially. And then on the next tab here, basically you'll see if you didn't have things like folds or bleeds or grommets, in your design file themselves. You can automate these tasks by making sure that you have the exact same fold, bleed, grommets for all jobs coming through this Hotfolder setup. The next tab here is if you wanted to divide multiple jobs into rows or columns, that sort of thing. These are kind of like nesting rules, tiling rules, that sort. So if you need to do overlap lines for tiling, so essentially you're mostly going to use this in a tiling workflow. If you want to export those layouts to be able to use them later, you can do that and designate a folder to do so. The next tab here basically is saying, what size roll media do we have? In this case, I'm just going to say 24-inch, and you can decide, is this through cassette, manual, depending upon the printer. You'll see different options here. In terms of a template, I can create my own templates, essentially. Like, let's say I wanted to have everything show up in the middle of the roll, right justified or left justified, that sort of thing. I mean, obviously you can drop things down, but that would waste paper. So usually you're going to choose left, center, or right justified here. If you want to keep it the original size, do you want to scale to fit that media? Or do you want things to all be a specific size, like 8x10s or something like that? On this page here, you can choose if you want to have standard marks, let's say like a label, for instance, that would show up at the bottom of your print, or other different marks, page registration marks, border marks, crop marks, those sorts of things. You can also make custom marks that you can utilize later in some of these cues. If you needed to mirror your output for some reason, maybe for backlit applications or for dye sublimation applications, you can do that as well. You can choose what type of a job label you would like. So job labels can also mean control strips. So if you wanted to measure something like on the bottom of a proof, or for quality control reasons, to see if you're in compliance with this setup, you can do that as well. You can choose whether you want to do double-sided printing, if your printer is able to do that, along with multiple different selections for that double-sided printing. The next tab here is for white printer workflows. None of these printers actually have white ink. If I had something like an S80, for instance, or an HPR 1000 or 2000 that has white ink, I'd be able to select that here and then choose what I want to do in terms of, white ink rules. And essentially, you would see potentially a different thing here for each type of printer based on its white ink settings. The next tab here is basically your color management settings. So I am in a photo workflow. So let's just say I'm just going to choose, let's say for maybe lab work, everything coming in should be in sRGB, for instance. And in PrintFactory, I tend to find that perceptual is the best for RGB. It's just in my own testing. So I'm going to set those to perceptual. Let's just say here, we're going to just keep this at coded grackle, or better yet, the way we've built things out, we're just going to use the ISO coded preset V2. And again, in CMYK, we definitely want this to be perceptual as well. And I can say for gray, I can choose black and white for any monochrome printing. And then you'll notice down here, generally people aren't printing in CIE lab, so it's probably less of a concern. We'll just change those to perceptual just for good measure. We would choose absolute, of course, if we were doing proofing workflows and we wanted to simulate the white point of the proofing standard that we're aiming for. Under here, you can choose to either remove all embedded profiles, so any files coming in the system, you could completely remove, and then it would tag whether it's a CMYK or an RGB file, whatever I have listed above. Embedded profiles, we could keep just the profile only. So that means if something came in Adobe RGB that it would print in Adobe RGB and it would bypass these RGB settings. If something came in Grackle, it would print in Grackle and it would bypass this ISO coded setting. So only in that situation, when you choose profile only, the only time it will use one of these render settings, color management policies, is if it's an untagged RGB, an untagged CMYK, or an untagged black and white file. In that case, then it would tag one of these options here. Your last choice, I should say, is that to choose profile and rendering intent. So not only will it keep the embedded profile, but if you have a rendering intent for relative color metric, let's say, or saturation or something like that, it'll also keep that rendering intent as well and not use perceptual rendering as we have here. Keep pure colors pure. I think that's for saturated workflows. You'll see here it says no color management is applied to vector elements with primary and secondary colors. These are going to be for very particular use case scenarios, not something that would you use for a photographic workflow. Okay, if we look at the next tab here, you'll see here that we're selecting the actual profile that we're going to use for this Hotfolder queue, and anything that you've already previously created for that particular printer will show up here. So in this case, we're making a glossy queue or Hotfolder, so I'm going to go ahead and choose that here, and then basically choose my perceptual rendering. Okay. If we had spot colors in this file, usually you're going to see that in the CMYK workflow, you can choose one of these settings here to convert things to processed colors. If they were in spot LAB or something else, or if they were in spot CMYK, you can do that also. Any color edits for this queue, standard color edits that you've saved out, you can select in here as well. So basically you would create that color edit in editor, and then you would in the GMG PrintFactory editor tool, which is basically this red icon down here in my taskbar that I've highlighted, and those color edits can be applied to this Hotfolder as a standardized automated setting. The last tab here basically is just showing us what we have in terms of the print settings that we see in PrintFactory. So any of these can be adjusted specific to this Hotfolder queue. So after I'm done with all my settings, I could go ahead and select OK. And now you can see that I actually have a Hotfolder queue set up as a printer here. Again, this could be put onto a server specifically if you'd like, so that everybody can drop files onto that Hotfolder that would automate directly to the RIP itself. So let me just kind of show you how this Hotfolder queue works. So essentially, if I wanted to take a file, I can take a print file. Let's just go ahead and choose this one right here. And I'm going to go ahead and copy it and go ahead and paste in here. Momentarily, we should see that populate into our queue. Basically, and you'll see that there. So I'll go ahead and cancel that out, and we'll go ahead and we can go ahead and see that our queue has processed and auto-size these columns, and you can see it's attempting to print that file as we see here. So essentially, that's a setup for setting up a Hotfolder. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Jim Mamihi. My email address is jmamihi, MEMIJE, @itsupplies.com. Thank you for watching the video. Hopefully this has been informative and something you could refer to if you need to set up Hotfolder queues in GMG PrintFactory's RIP. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching this. If you would like to see more of these videos, please go to our YouTube channel.